and welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Goldberg of Optimus Performance, bringing you practical tips and ideas on leadership, team development, and employee performance in the workplace. And I'm really happy to have as my guest expert, Alfred Poor. Welcome, Alfred.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here.
Alfred has launched the Speakerspringboard, you can see up on his screen. And he's an expert on many things, I'm finding out, because he actually interviewed me a few days ago for his podcast. And now I'm doing the same for mine and my YouTube channel. And just off the bat, being an expert on how to present yourself, he gave me a great tip. So he's my new go-to person for how to present yourself. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How to present yourself, I guess on screen, but in person as well, because you'll have both occasions in life. And I know that's one of the biggest fears of any business owner, presenter, those that don't do it on a regular basis. It's known to be one of the biggest fears in life is public speaking. And I know it was one of mine way back in elementary school. I used to sit in the back and hope the teacher didn't call on me because I turned beet red when I had to stand up and say anything. But of course, I've learned over time to shift that through the training and development field and taking courses on how to present myself. So I'm really happy to have you here today to provide some tips to leaders, business owners, on what it takes to make a great presentation. And in the age that we're in now with so much online webinars, presentations, it's really important, as you say, to differentiate yourself and show that you are not only prepared as an expert on your subject, but that you're prepared on how to really engage people. So welcome again, Alfred. And give us a little history about you're a tech expert, also consulting in the field of what I read on your LinkedIn channel, wearable technology for medical applications, which I find extremely interesting, and read about how these devices are going to really change healthcare in the coming year. I already see it happening now with the Apple Watch. So tell us about what you're doing now with the Speakerspringboard and how you decided to launch this from what you do as a technology expert.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. So jump around a little bit. The first thing I want to do is go back to one of the initial things that you said, and that is that people are really afraid of public speaking. There's a thing out there that, it's like the kid who was dying of cancer and wanted to collect business cards, and that got totally out of control. And, he went into remission 25 years later as an adult. He had to change, his family had to move, change their address because the business cards kept coming. There was no way to put an end to it. The whole thing about people being more afraid of public speaking than dying is a myth. This is something I've looked into in some depth. It appeared the first time in a book back in the late 60s, early 70s, the Book of Lists. And it was one of the lists in there had public speaking ahead of dying as things that people were afraid of. And I've dug deeply into this, and there is no source for that claim. So it is scary. I don't want to diminish that, but I just want every chance I can get to, try to put a stake in the heart of this myth that persists.
Well, thank you for telling us that. That's good to
know. So jumping ahead a little bit, I'll get to the background a little in a moment, but jumping ahead a little bit, I want to talk about that fear because I experience it in many different formats. I'm a bluegrass musician. I play mandolin and sing. And when I'm first learning a song, I'm all tense and wound up, trying to remember the chords and the melody and the words and the lyrics and the harmonies and all that stuff. And, and it's, if I were to step out on stage to try to do that, it's a terrifying thing for me. The trick is, and this is something I go into in my demonstration webinar, but the trick is not to avoid the things that you're scared of. The fact is our brains are wired to be scared of the unfamiliar. Caveman walking down the path at night, hears rustling in the bushes. He doesn't know what it is. He's afraid of it because it could be a saber-toothed tiger that's going to jump out and eat him. Well, we still have that saber-toothed tiger fear in us today. But the trick is not to avoid the paths at night. The trick is to become familiar with it and know what's going to happen. And you do that through practice. And as I know you've experienced over the years, with the more speaking you do, the more training you do, the more getting up in front of people, the more familiar it becomes. And so I don't care whether it's speaking online, whether it's having a Zoom meeting with somebody, trying to do a sales meeting, singing a song, acting in a play, whatever it is, make the unfamiliar familiar and you'll be comfortable with it.
Make the unfamiliar familiar. That's great advice. Very good, because it applies to really any skill that you're trying to learn. Any skill. And public presenting yourself is another skill.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this service that you're providing.
Sure.
Who typically wants to hire you, let's say? Who typically has a perceived problem and wants to address it with what you teach?
So I've been public speaking for decades, and probably about 10, 15 years ago, started looking to do that, more of that as a paid speaker, make that part of my revenue stream. And as you mentioned, I've got a lot of technology experience. And so at least 8 years ago, I started doing online presentations, produced my own webinars. I've been a paid speaker at other people's webinars and online events. I've actually produced events, put on summits for a group of speakers. Last year, I actually produced a whole series of online trade shows for consumer electronics companies.
Wow.
And so, I've got a fair amount of technology experience and savvy about all this. And so among my community of other professional speakers, back in 2019, round about March, I kept seeing the same email from different people saying, oh, well, I just had my last event for 2019 canceled because of COVID. And so I guess I'll just have to sit back and wait for 2020 for things to get back to normal. Well, we saw how well that strategy worked out. But at the time, I realized there was an opportunity to help other speakers. So I started offering free workshops online, helping them understand how that they could make that pivot from on stage to online and continue their professional speaking career, even though physical events were shut down. And they were really well received. People really enjoyed them, got a lot out of them. But I realized as I was doing it that I had a whole lot more than I could fit into an hour. And so that's where Speakerspringboard comes in. And what I've done is I've created an online course that's 10 modules, soup to nuts, covers what I call the more mechanical things like cameras and lighting and sound and all that stuff, but also the less obvious, more strategic parts about how you dress differently for being online, or how you should organize your presentation differently because for an online audience. And so a bunch of tips like that. In putting this together and help promoting it, around to different audiences, I've discovered that it's not just for professional speakers. Because as you mentioned, we're all now doing business online. Business owners, corporate executives, coaches, and sales professionals especially. And the thing that strikes me, and I'm on lots of online events and with some very technically savvy people. The thing that absolutely floors me is that the same people who would be very intentional about how they dress when they're setting up a meeting, where that meeting's going to be, how it's going to take place, how it's going to be orchestrated, when you meet the person, how you're going to greet them, solid handshake, look them in the eye, all that good stuff. When it comes to a Zoom meeting or an online presentation, all that just goes out the window. They plop their notebook down wherever they are, they open it up and they start. And all that intentionality, it goes out the window. And so I believe that you can, with very little effort, not, little money, little time expense on making improvements, that you can improve how you appear, that impression that you make in an online conversation. And I also believe that right now there's the opportunity to have a competitive advantage. Again, because so many people aren't thinking about this. They're just, again, opening up their laptops and having at it.
So explain that a little more. How does that give you a competitive advantage?
Well, just imagine you're having a meeting with a potential client, and would you meet in a McDonald's, or would you meet at a Starbucks, or would you meet at a corporate office meeting room or something like that? Would you dress in shorts and a t-shirt, or would you dress in a business attire that's appropriate for the level of conversation that you're going to have? Most of us are tuned to that, and don't even think twice about doing it. But when it comes to having an online meeting, they'll set up their laptop wherever they are, and this may look familiar. Some of you kind of like this, right?
Oh my God.
But you're too close, and and they're not looking at you, and all that. That's something that's so commonplace that that's why I think that you can stand out if you look better on the screen, if you look more professional, it's on brand. If your image on the screen matches up with your messaging and your brand.
Right. And that is really key today to build the trust, I'd say. One of the biggest things for selling professional services, or anything actually, but especially for professional services, is that trust. And when somebody, I guess, takes the time to work on their presentation, how they look, it shows it's a path to building faster credibility and trust, because they go together, right? Trust
and engagement. I mean,
engagement.
The classic saying is nobody does business with a company.
Right.
People do business with a person. And the more you can be a person who is engaging and professional and prepared, the more likely you're going to be able to start that conversation off on a good foot. And it's not just external. I mean, it's internal. If you're a manager and you're working with a distributed workforce, maybe working at home, maybe spread across the country, you're going to be doing online meetings. How you appear in those meetings is going to have an impact on your engagement with your employees, just as would if you were meeting in a conference room.
Right, it's going to affect your the impact you have and your influence.
Exactly.
So what are some things that people learn? I mean, you mentioned a few. There's the 3 I's I read somewhere about you that you incorporate in your approach. I thought that was quite genius, or simple, 3 things, but they made really good sense. Could you just say what those are? Explain.
So again, a lot of people get paralysis by analysis. A lot of people pursue perfection. I don't want to do this until I can do it right. So I need, fancy camera, I need fancy lighting, I need fancy backdrops, I need, have to all this skill and all that. No, my whole approach is to take you where you are with what you've got, and make improvements. And the 3 I's for the improvements is that they're incremental, that they're intentional, and that they're impactful. So intentional, not just flailing around and try this, try that. Do the things that are going to make a difference. Incremental in that you don't have to change everything at once. Get one thing better, establish that, and then build better and better on top of that. And then impactful. Do the ones that make a difference, right? Yeah, you can go out and buy a whole new wardrobe if you want, but you probably don't need to do that. And that's probably not going to be the most leveraged use of your resources. So incremental, intentional, impactful.
Well, I think that's terrific. And that's a great thing for people to retain. If one thing to retain is those 3 I's from this conversation. And it reminds me of, you could apply that to just about anything, like any continuous improvement initiative in a company. That's a great, the 3 I's can apply to anything. So that's a great tip. So do you have, you're doing this webinar you mentioned, I think you had told me that next week. Can anybody sign up for that to learn more about your speaker springboard?
Sure. So I am a value-based kind of guy. I like to deliver as much value as I possibly can. And so in order to help people understand what, improving your online presence is all about, I provide a monthly demonstration of some of the different, the most easily accessible features of things that you can change. And I hold them on the 3rd Thursday of every month. And so it's happening next week. I actually have it scheduled for 2 times of the day, an earlier one for Eastern time, one in the morning, which allows folks in the UK and Europe to take part without having to stretch their days too long. And then I have one in the afternoon, which is more convenient for West Coast and places like that. I will mention, for those of you who are watching this before August, in August, I'm going to be doing a 3rd session late that will be at a time that folks in Australia, New Zealand, and on that other side of the world will be able to fit into their schedules. But again, it's totally free. The one kicker is there's no replay. So you can sign up for it, but if you want to hear it, you've got to show up. And the way you find it is to go to speakerspringboard.com/demonstration.
It's pretty simple. And I'll put that in the description of this video and the show notes for the podcast so people can find that. And I'll also put that out in my one of my newsletters as well at the appropriate time. So we could because I think it's really important that, that's one thing for business owners, leaders who, and you mentioned too, just managers that need to present to their team. The better they come across, the more they appear as a better leader who's prepared. And so whenever you have to get up in front of people and speak, it's really important to know how you're going to come across and what you have as tools to use to make yourself look good and more impactful. So fantastic. Really enjoyed this conversation. Is there, other than your webinar, is there any other free resource that you have that you'd like to provide to people?
At this point, for the people who show up for the demonstration, right. I do have a number of handouts and so forth that they can get. But at this point, that's the
Webinar is
That's the gateway.
To
Yep.
the other stuff that you can offer.
And just to go back to that value thing, just because the webinar is free to register doesn't mean that I don't value your time. I mean, one of the things that, all we've got is time, and we just trade that for other things. But so when somebody signs up for one of my webinars, or when I'm doing a presentation at a conference or corporate meeting or whatever, that's a gift. Everybody in that room is giving me their time, which to me is extremely valuable. So my whole approach is to try to deliver as much value in that time as I can. I want you to be able to walk away with ahas and things that you're going to be able to implement right away, changes. I mean, just as you were saying, we had a short conversation after the interview I did with you, and it's already changed some of the things you're doing about how you're presenting yourself online.
Well,
So,
it changed. Yeah. I mean, you told me I was too close to the camera and I backed up, and I saw you were standing. So I decided to do all these now standing, and I actually recorded one of my videos for YouTube, I think the same day this week. And I did do it standing up at kind of like the same position.
Yep.
So I did apply what you taught me. Is there anything else, like here for the audience, that you would critique to improve, and how I'm?
Well, I think rather than that, let me just explain a little bit about that framing.
Okay.
So again, we're used to seeing people's face filling the screen, all right?
Right.
I like to say that everything we've been taught about how to speak on stage is wrong when it comes to speaking online.
Really?
Don't look at stage presenters as your model. Look at the television.
Okay.
Watch your favorite news show. See how the presenters, the commentators, the guest analysts, see how they appear on the screen. And you'll find they're not framed like this with their face filling the screen. And I was talking to a psychologist from Stanford who has studied online interactions in depth. And he made a really great point. He said, when you're like this, you're too close. You're in my face. You're in my space. And so the immediate reaction is you want to back away from that, which if you're trying to engage with somebody, that's exactly the opposite reaction you want to create with them. So his point was, the interesting thing is the more of your torso that appears on the screen, the more engaging, the more approachable, the more trustworthy you appear. And so again, don't look on stage, watch the television, see how the professional speakers on TV are framed. And you'll see that almost everybody is the camera, the bottom of the frame is somewhere between the bottom of their rib cage and their belt. So somewhere in there is a better framing than that one there. Another piece is you don't want to have the top of your head cut off because that looks weird, right? No, you're good. You're good. I checked you before we started to make sure.
Yeah, you actually helped me adjust that a little bit.
Yep.
Because it was too high and we were seeing the top of the curtain rod.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. But so the one that gets me is this one.
Right, there's too much room.
We've all seen this, they've got the camera aimed up high, you have a great view of their ceiling or the back wall or whatever. And all you see is, this little tiny head. So show as much torso as you can. And one of the big advantages there, this is some of the stuff I go into a little more in depth during the demonstration. But when you're like this, and if you're doing something with your hands, if you want to demonstrate something, you have to do like this, bring your hands in tight, and it doesn't look natural, and it's, it just looks strange. But if you can have more of your body showing, you can hold your hands more naturally, your movements will look more natural. The big thing to remember is keep your movements small and intentional. Again, watch television and see how they do it. Now, they're not flailing around with great big gestures like you would do on stage, and they don't move around because that makes people seasick. But, keep your hands in close to your body, and you can make gestures, but you want to make sure that they're intentional and impactful. That they make sense with what you're doing, and they're not just some nervous tick that you're repeating over and over again. But those movements become much more natural when there's more of your torso in the frame.
Great. Well, those are great tips. Thank you, Alfred. Is there one question I should have asked you that I didn't? That would be important.
Yeah, I think the big one is people wonder, how much am I going to have to spend to get to something that's going to be better than what I'm doing now. And my whole approach is start with what you've got, make the most of what you've got, and learn how to use it better. And then you'll pick the next increment that's going to be the most impactful, and you change that. So maybe you're using a laptop, maybe getting an external webcam, $50, $60, will make a big difference in how you appear on screen. But you can spend thousands of dollars if you want, but you don't have to. Very modest purchases can make an enormous difference in how you come across online. Certainly cheaper than a new suit.
Excellent advice. Take it slow, but make it impactful.
Yep.
And intentional. Well, I'm going to remember those 3 I's. Actually, I'm going to write them down right after again, and keep it handy, because I think it can apply to just about anything that you want to improve upon. Well, Alfred, it was great talking to you about this, and I actually look forward to attending your webinar when I can in the upcoming months, and we'll put links to that to at least your Speakerspringboard website in the show notes and description of the video, so people can go and find the date when they want to sign up for that webinar and participate.
It's speakerspringboard.com/demonstration, and that's always live. You can always register for the next session.
Next webinar.
And so when one ends, I just roll it over to the next set of dates.
And do you have a Q&A period at the end of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's participative as well if people want to.
Yes. My style is to deliver as much value as possible.
Sure. And you're proving that today.
Well, thank you. The program, I try to keep it under 50 minutes.
50.
And which leaves 10 minutes in the hour for question and answers. However, I don't shut down the session until everybody's questions have been answered. So as long as people hang around with more questions, I will be happy to stay and answer them. And so, there's you can also always reach out to me by email. You can reach me at alfred@alfredpoor.com. It's a nice, simple, easy one to remember.
That is, yeah. Okay, Alfred. Well, thank you again. Thanks for joining. And I look forward to your webinar. I'd like to attend that. For those that are here for the first time or have not subscribed to the channel or to the podcast, I encourage you to do so. That way you'll get news of new episodes and videos as they get released. And I also send out a newsletter informing people of what's interesting coming up, things like Alfred's webinar. So I encourage you to do that. There's also free downloads on my website for forms and worksheets that you could also have access to. So thanks, everyone, and we'll talk again soon.